Hey guys, Teacher Laurie here, Mrs. Gaylord, here for another reading lesson today. If you are with me today and you have a copy of the reading book today, we're on page 168, and today's lesson is on unfamiliar words. What to do when you have an unfamiliar word. When you're reading and you don't know what a word is, there's some ways that we can figure out the words as a good reader. And today we're going to figure out some of those ways how we can find words. Today's selection is called Who Works in a Hospital? If you have not read the article today, I want you to press pause on the video and go ahead and read the article before we start the lesson. Who works in a hospital? A hospital is a busy place. It may even seem confusing at first. Many patients, the people who need to see a doctor, come in every day. Visitors come to see their sick family member or friend. Doctors, nurses, and other hospital workers move calmly from job to job. They know just what to do. They want to give sick or hurt patients the care that they need. Now, already in this passage, from reading that first paragraph, you know what this passage is going to be mostly about. Do you remember what we call that? The main idea, okay? The main idea can be found by looking in that first paragraph and looking in the title of the selection. Who works in a hospital, right? Okay. So by looking at the title and the first part of the article, we're going to find out what we are going to be reading about here. Okay. Already in the beginning, we know that we're going to be reading about hospital workers. Hospital workers. Very good. Okay. What did the first paragraph tell you were some names of some hospital workers? Okay. It mentioned doctors. Okay. And you may have an idea from things you already know. Nurses. Okay. And other workers. It didn't really name the other workers. We'll talk about them in a minute. Okay. So we'll put others. These are the people we'll be reading about today. If you find some unfamiliar words in the story, as usual, I want you to circle them as you're reading, and then maybe we'll go over them in just a minute, okay? Paragraph 2. The hospital medical staff is made up of teams of doctors and nurses. Doctors must examine patients to find the best way to make them better. They check each patient's temperature and heartbeat. They also ask a lot of questions. The doctors think up plans to make each patient better. Some patients will need special medicine. Other patients may need to have an operation. A person who is sick or hurt must stay in the hospital for a few days. Were there any unfamiliar words in that paragraph to you? Okay. You may have come up with the word operation. Okay. How about the word patient? Okay. You may have come up with the word temperature. Now, these may be familiar to you, but they may be unfamiliar to some. So we may have circled those words. Okay. Let's look at those words, how we could decide what these words mean. At first, it says they check each patient's temperature. Do you know what a patient is in the hospital? Okay. This is the type of patient that's a person, right? A person that goes in who is sick is the patient. When it says take their temperature, can you look at the words around it? They check each patient's temperature and heartbeat. Okay. You may know from going to the doctor yourself that your temperature has to be checked to see if you are warm or cold, Remember, we talked about in our animal unit that humans as well as mammals are warm-blooded. We need to have a certain temperature to our bodies. Okay. And the other one is the word operation. It says, other patients may need to have an operation. Have you heard of the word operation before? Probably. Okay. An operation is where a doctor has to, usually, an operation involves doing some kind of medical work where they would make a cut or something on your body, and then they would have to figure out what's wrong and then sew it back up. Okay. We're in paragraph 3. Nurses take care of patients who are in the hospital. Some nurses help doctors with operations or special tests. They make sure patients improve each day. They check the patients that are getting better with the right medicine. There are other workers who help the hospital run smoothly. Some workers give x-rays to find out if someone has a broken bone. Others carry out tests to find out why a patient is sick. Some workers make healthy meals or keep the hospital rooms clean. Hospital workers do many different jobs, but they all work together, and they work hard. Their goal is to give all patients the care that they need to get better. Now, looking at that article, what would you say this article was mostly about? Okay, it's mostly about, if you had to come up with 1 or 2 words, I would say it's mostly about hospital workers. What were some of the hospital workers that were mentioned in here? Okay, nurses, correct. What else? Doctors. Mentioned a couple other medical workers. Okay, people who give x-rays. So the x-ray technicians. It said people that make food for the hospital. People that clean for the hospital. Okay, that just mentioned a few. Very good. Okay. Now, why do you think the medical staff and the other staff that works at the hospitals would need to work together? Can you figure out from the paragraphs what the reason would be? Why would they need to work together? Okay. If you look at the last paragraph, in paragraph 5, it says their goal is what? To give patients the care that they need. Why would they want to give patients care? So the patients can get better. Very good. Better. Okay. All right. So let's look at some questions here. Now, it says, what is the meaning of the word patience? Okay. That's one of the other things we just talked about. Patience. One of our underlined words here. All right. It says, can you look at the sentence I'm going to read you and tell me what the clue is if you don't know what the word patience means? Many patients, the people who need to see a doctor, come in every day. Okay. After the word patients, there's a comma, and it tells you actually what the patients are. Who are the patients? You can say it out loud. The people who need to see a doctor or a nurse sometimes. Very good. Okay. Patients. What is the meaning of the phrase medical staff? Let's look at some examples. Okay. When I say medical staff, I put hospital workers here. Look at some of the ones we wrote. People that make food, doctors, x-ray technicians, cleaners, and nurses. Would you say that the medical staff, though, is, okay, those are hospital workers. The medical staff is the actually ones that do the care for these patients. So if I had to choose out of this group, which ones were the medical staff, which two would you choose? The medical staff were the nurses and the doctors, right? Okay, so knowing that, let's look at these answers. If I had to choose from the medical staff, is it A, people who keep files of plans, B, people who treat the sick, C, people who keep things clean, or D, people who make the food? Who is the medical staff? Do they make the plans, treat the sick, clean, or make the food? They treat the sick, so I would choose that one. Very good. Look at this sentence from the passage. Doctors must examine patients to find the best way to make them better. They also check the patient's temperature and heartbeat, and they ask a lot of questions. What is the meaning of the word examine? Okay, let's look at this word. This may be a new word for you. Examine. Okay, let's look at it again. They check each patient's temperature and heartbeat. The doctors examine the patients to find the best way to make them better. If you're going to examine the patients, these guys do the examining, the nurses and doctors examine the patients. Would you say make plans for, do surgery on, give medicine to, or check them over carefully? Okay. It gives you a clue in the sentence afterward. Doctors must examine the patients. They have to check their temperature and heartbeat. So would you say examine means make plans for, do surgery on, give medicine to, or check them carefully? I would say check them carefully. Good job. Very good. All right, now we're going to look at some clues and some meanings of a word. This lesson is on unfamiliar words and meaning. So let's look. Okay, so here's the phrase I want you to look at. We just talked about it. We made a web about it, and it's called hospital workers. Okay, think about what I just read and what you read, and look at the phrase hospital workers. Okay, so I'm going to give you a clue, and I want you to tell me the meaning of it. Okay. All right. So what would be a clue from the story? What do the hospital workers do? Okay. These are all the workers. It says they do many different jobs, right? They can x-ray, carry out tests, make healthy meals, keep room clean. Let's just put a couple of them. Meals, clean, x-ray, give test. Those are some of the clues that it tells you what the hospital workers do. So what would be the meaning of the word hospital workers? Okay, it kind of gives you a clue. Really, a worker that works in the hospital, right? So the meaning of that would be, you could write people who do jobs in the hospital. Okay, the meaning of the word could be people who do jobs in a hospital. Now that you know what the hospital workers are, what do you think the goal of the hospital workers is? It said that in the last paragraph. Let me go back to paragraph 5. Hospital workers do many jobs, but they all work together, and they work hard. Their goal is to give patients the care they need to get better. Okay, so let's go over the answers and see if you can choose A. Hold a finger up for A, B, C, or D. What is the goal of the hospital workers? Remember, the word goal means what they're wanting to do. A, to check their patients are getting better. Maybe. B, to give the patients the care they need to get better. Maybe. C, is their goal to check each patient's temperature and heartbeat? No. And is their goal D, to keep files on the patients? No, somebody else does that. Let's look at those two answers. What's the goal of all the hospital workers? Is it, now we're deciding between A and B, to check that the patients are getting better or to give the patients they need the care to get better? What would you choose? B. Very good. Very good. Okay. Now, look at this word. Another word that was mentioned in our story was the word improve. What if you weren't quite sure what the word improve means? Let's look at how it's used in a sentence. Improve. Here's the sentence. They make sure the patients improve each day. Can you give me maybe a meaning of the word improve? They make sure the patients improve each day. If you're in a hospital and you're a doctor or nurse, are you going to hope the patient gets better and gets out or gets worse? Improve would mean to get better. Very good. Okay, so you would write the meaning of the word improve is to get better. If I ask you to find evidence from the story that means that, could you go back and look in paragraph 3? Could you find the sentence that means the same as improve? Try it. Press pause on the video and try to find the sentence that means the same as the word improve. They check the patients are getting better with the right medicine. That's the meaning of the word improve. They check the patients are getting better with the right medicine. So here, the word improve means to get better. All right, so if I ask you to write a paragraph as we close on who works in a hospital, could you organize your thoughts enough to write a paragraph? Who works in the hospital? Okay. You could mention in your paragraph doctors, nurses, and others. Okay. What are some clues from the story that you would write as you summarize your paragraph? Let's do a clue number 1, 2, and number 3. Okay. A clue from the story that would tell you what they do would be, you could pick many. Go back from the story as you print it out and look. I picked many patients. The people who need to see a doctor come in the hospital every day. The hospital is a busy place. Miss Gaylord had to go to the hospital this weekend for something. She's better now. But many people come into the hospital every day. Okay. All right. Another clue in who works in a hospital. Okay. Could be in the story, it says, do you remember doctors, nurses, and other workers work calmly and they move from job to job, it says. That means if you want to work in the hospital, are you going to probably have a busy day? Probably. Very good. Okay. Many other people come into the hospital too, besides the patient who comes into the hospital. Visitors and friends come to see their loved ones, right? Okay. The hospital is a busy place. If you could use all these 3 evidences to write, how is the hospital a busy place? I would use these 3 clues. Many people come into the hospital. Doctors, nurses, and other workers work calmly. Visitors and friends come to see their loved ones. Okay, as you finish up that's the last thing that you need to do in this lesson. If you wanted to get out a piece of paper and try to practice your writing skills, and I want you to write a paragraph on how the hospital is a busy place. You can include who works in the hospital, like we talked about. You could include why it's a busy place, what is done in the hospital. Practice your writing skills with this reading lesson as you finish up, okay? Now, today's lesson was on finding the unfamiliar word meanings. If you're not sure what a meaning is of a word, remember the skills we've learned this year. Look around the word. Look around it for meanings, other words that can tell you what the meaning is. That's called context. Look in the context of the passage, and you can see what the word means. You can also try to fit a word that you are thinking that it is, and see, like we did, we narrow it down. Is the answer A, B, C, or D? And we can choose 2 out of 4 and then make a good guess. Another thing you can do if you don't have a dictionary is you can look at the letters in the word and see, is there another word that looks similar to this word, or a word inside a word? There's several things you can do to find the meaning in a text. So I want you to practice those reading skills as you continue to read. Now, don't forget to look through your iReady and be doing those lessons every day, 20 minutes a day, still, even through the end of the week. That can help you, and you can continue that all summer long, okay? Thank you for joining us for our lesson today, and this is our last week before we wrap it up. So let's learn all the things that we can, okay? And I thank you for joining, and I'll see you next time, okay? See you next time.